Smoky enough for you? Well, the big story this week was the haze. My God, the haze. It was in New York, it was in Philadelphia, it was in Washington, D.C., and all the surrounding areas. Well, never mind the fact that this happened out west, well, and no one cared about it, right? Well, are increased wildfires a real mark of climate change? Or, more importantly, are wildfires actually even increasing? Well, the Green New Deal's high priestess, oh, of course, she seems to think so. Earlier this week, AOC accused the 24 hours of smog and high temperatures in Puerto Rico. It's hot in June in Puerto Rico. Did you know that? To push her policy prescriptions. It bears repeating how unprepared we are for the climate crisis. We must adapt our food systems, energy grids, infrastructure, healthcare, etc., ASAP to prepare for what's to come and catch up to what is already here. Dun, dun, dun. But famed meteorologist Anthony Watts says she's wrong on both counts. He's here now to explain why. Anthony, great to see you tonight. First, on the insistence, and this drumbeat has continued now for quite some time, that wildfires are increasing, the numbers of wildfires. Is that actually the case?
Well, no. And in fact, there was a huge wildfire event in Canada on May 19th, 1789, that caused the entire New England area to dark out so much that people had to light candles to see during midday. And it was called New England's Dark Day. So this kind of event has happened before. But more importantly than that, we've had wildfires in the United States that were worse, far worse, back in the 1920s and 30s. And the data supports it. The data shows that wildfires covered much more acreage way back then than they do today.
Now, Anthony, I want you to hear what the Canadian Prime Minister, pretty boy Justin Trudeau, said earlier in the week.
Year after year, with climate change, we're seeing more and more intense wildfires, and in places where they don't normally happen. That's why we've invested to train more community-based firefighters across the country.
Well, as it turns out, wildfires in Canada are quite normal. So normal that Canada's government website has a page, Anthony, devoted to educating the public about them. And this one says that why forests need fires. So they actually concede that, and that's correct. So what is this really all about, all this hysteria?
Well, you know, what's happened lately is that the left has started to blame virtually every weather or abnormal event on climate change. It's sort of become the universal boogeyman of blame. I mean, something changes that's abnormal, well, it must be climate change. They don't really think this through. They don't go back and look at data. They don't go back and look at history to see if this has happened before. They don't look for the causes and things. And so that's the problem. They're out there spewing rhetoric, and it really boils down to this. Who do you want to believe? You want to believe a bartender turned politician with an agenda, or solid data that says there's no climate crisis? Well, I choose data every day of the week and twice on Sunday.
Now, this other very important story is your contention that temperature measurement stations that are strategically placed to promote, in your view, the most radical climate priorities. If you could explain that for us, I'd really appreciate it tonight.
Well, it's really pretty simple. NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, is in charge of weather stations all across the United States for measuring temperature used in climate studies. The problem is they're not maintaining them properly. And my studies, going and visiting hundreds and hundreds of these stations around the United States, shows that they're improperly sited. NOAA has a simple rule about the placement of these stations compared to where they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be in pristine areas, like in a field somewhere. But what we actually have found is that they're in parking lots. We have found that they're next to brick walls. We found that they're next to exhaust vents for air conditioners, all sorts of things. And in fact, my study last year, following up from one I did in 2009, shows the problem getting worse. 96% of the weather stations in the United States used to measure climate by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration are compromised. And these compromised stations actually read warmer than the stations that are still pristine, that are out in the fields, that are away from all the infrastructure of humanity.
Thank you for doing this, and great to see you as always.
My pleasure.